Hey there, curious minds. Welcome to this intellectual journey. Today we're going to unpack one of the most deeply ingrained ideas in our culture, one that probably all of us learned in school the same way, almost like an unquestionable dogma that defines the progress of humanity and art. When you think of the Renaissance, what image comes to mind? It's most likely 15th century Italy with geniuses like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, the patronage of the Medici, and a flourishing of arts and sciences that pulled Europe out of the so-called Dark Ages. But what if I told you that image is just one piece of a much larger, more fascinating puzzle? What if this explosion of human-centered thought, what we call humanism, wasn't an exclusively European event, but a global phenomenon happening in parallel all over the world? Before we dive in, I wanted to tell you a little about the images you're seeing. To bring this narrative to life, I've used AI tools to generate them. So think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and atmosphere of what I'm telling you. I truly hope you enjoy it. To understand this, we first need to simplify what humanism is. Far from being a complex academic term, at its core, it's a philosophy that puts the human being at the center. It celebrates reason, individual potential, creativity, and the pursuit of knowledge, not just divine, but earthly. In Europe, this meant rediscovering classical texts from Greece and Rome. Renaissance thinkers saw in them a model of a society centered on human logic and beauty, an ideal they wanted to revive. But the key here is rediscovering their own classics. Think about that, it's a crucial distinction. The traditional narrative tells us that while Europe was awakening, the rest of the world remained static or in decline. This view, known as Eurocentrism, is not only limited, but completely ignores the vibrant intellectual revolutions that were happening on other continents. Let's first travel to Ming Dynasty China, a contemporary of the Italian Renaissance. There, a thinker named Wang Yangming was leading a philosophical revolution that would change Asia forever. His school of thought is known as the School of Mind or Heart. Wang Yangming proposed a radical idea. He argued that universal knowledge and morality were not found in external ancient texts, but within the mind of each individual. Truth and action, he said, were one and the same. This is known as the unity of knowledge and action. Think about it for a moment. This is a form of pure humanism. It places individual consciousness and introspection at the center of existence. It's a call for each person to trust their own moral compass and their capacity to understand the world. Doesn't that sound incredibly modern and empowering? Wang Yangming's followers took these ideas even further, questioning traditional Confucian hierarchies and promoting a form of individualism that valued personal experience over dogma. An intense climate of intellectual debate was created throughout China. Now let's shift our gaze south to the Mughal Empire in India, which also flourished during this very same era. Here, humanism wasn't expressed so much in pure philosophy, but in an explosion of poetry, art, and an unprecedented policy of religious syncretism. Emperor Akbar the Great, for example, was a fascinating figure. Despite being illiterate, he had a deep curiosity about all religions and philosophies. He created a court where Muslim, Hindu, Christian, and Jain scholars debated freely about the nature of God and truth. From these debates emerged a new syncretic faith, meaning a blend of various beliefs, called Dini Ilahi, or the divine faith. Although it didn't last, its intention was purely humanist, seeking to find the universal values that connect all humanity beyond doctrinal differences. The poetry of this era, written in Persian and other local languages, also reflected this spirit. Poets like Kabir and later Ghalib explored themes of love, doubt, and the individual human experience with a depth that rivals any sonnet by Petrarch or Shakespeare. These poets often used language that challenged religious orthodoxy, suggesting that the connection to the divine was a personal and intimate experience, not something mediated by institutions. They celebrated the human being in all their complexity, with their passions and contradictions. But the story doesn't end in Asia. Now let's get ready to cross continents and delve into one of the most unfairly forgotten chapters of intellectual history, that of the African continent. While the Duomo was being built in Florence in the heart of the Mali Empire and later the Songhai Empire, a city shone as a beacon of knowledge. Its name was Timbuktu. It wasn't a dusty trading post, it was one of the great intellectual capitals of the world. Timbuktu housed the prestigious Sankore University, which wasn't a single building, but a collection of independent schools. Scholars and students from across the Islamic world flocked there to study law, theology, astronomy, mathematics, and above all, to debate. The Timbuktu manuscripts, hundreds of thousands of which survive today, are proof of this incredible intellectual activity. They contain not only copies of the Quran, but also treatises on ethics, law, optics, botany, and philosophy that demonstrate a profound faith in human reason. One of the greatest scholars of this tradition was Ahmed Baba al-Masufi. He was an incredibly prolific jurist, biographer, and writer. His work focused on Islamic law, but his approach was deeply humanist, always seeking justice and reason within tradition. Ahmed Baba and his contemporaries believed that knowledge was the path to a more just and orderly society. They championed the importance of education for all and valued intellectual debate as the primary tool for reaching truth, a cornerstone of humanist thought in any culture. What's fascinating about the Timbuktu tradition is that, like European humanists, they greatly valued their own classics, which in this case were the great works of the Islamic world. But they didn't just copy them, they interpreted, debated, and expanded upon them with their own intellect. So what do we have here? In China, a movement that values the individual mind as the source of truth. In India, a celebration of human experience through poetry and syncretism. In Africa, a center of scholarship based on reason and law. 3 continents, 3 humanisms. The inevitable question is, was there direct dialogue between them? Did they read each other's works? In most cases, the answer is no. Distances and cultural and linguistic barriers were immense. We're not talking about a single, connected global conversation like today's. However, this makes the phenomenon even more extraordinary. What these parallel movements suggest is that humanism is not an invention of one specific culture that was then exported to the rest. It is perhaps an inherent human tendency when societies reach a certain level of stability. When there's peace, trade, and prosperous cities, it seems that human minds everywhere begin to ask the same fundamental questions. Who am I? What is my potential? How can I create a more just and beautiful society? What is my place in the cosmos beyond dogmas? The European Renaissance was, without a doubt, spectacular in its artistic and scientific achievements. But by calling it the Renaissance with a capital T, we run the risk of thinking it was the only one. History is much richer and polycentric, meaning with many centers of power and influence. Recognizing a global renaissance, or better yet, multiple simultaneous renaissances, doesn't diminish Europe's merits. On the contrary, it enriches our understanding of humanity. It shows us that the longing for knowledge, beauty, and self-improvement is a universal heritage. The next time you hear about the Renaissance, remember Wang Yangming meditating on the mind, Mughal poets singing of universal love, and the scholars of Timbuktu advocating for reason. Remember that the awakening of humanity was a chorus, not a solo performance. This global approach forces us to reevaluate not only history, but also the present. It helps us see cultural connections not as a threat, but as a continuation of a conversation humanity has been having with itself for centuries, across vast oceans and deserts. The idea that a single civilization has a monopoly on progress is a dangerous fiction. Real history, the complete history, teaches us that human genius has flourished on many soils and under many suns. Diversity of thought is our greatest strength as a species. Thus, by studying these other forms of humanism, we don't just learn about the past. We gain tools to build a more inclusive future. We understand that there are many ways to be human, and that each culture has an essential piece of the puzzle to offer all of us. The humanism of the Ming Dynasty, with its emphasis on introspection, teaches us about the importance of self-knowledge. In a world full of external distractions, this idea of finding truth within oneself is more relevant than ever. It's a call to calm and reflection. The syncretism of the Mughal Empire, for its part, offers us a powerful lesson on tolerance and interfaith dialogue. Akbar's search for a common truth across all faiths is a model for a world often divided by dogma and intolerance. It shows us that unity is possible. And Timbuktu's academic tradition reminds us of the power of knowledge and reason to build just societies. Their belief that education and rigorous debate are the foundation of law and ethics is a fundamental pillar for any democracy aspiring to be truly just. It's not about creating a competition between civilizations, asking who did it better. It's about expanding our definition of what counts as history. It's about moving from a linear, singular view to a complex and beautiful network of interconnected and parallel human stories. Therefore, the Renaissance isn't just a golden age in Italy. It's a global testament to the human spirit. It's proof that in different corners of the world, people, driven by curiosity and hope, decided to look inward and upward and reimagine their place in the universe. This perspective frees us from cultural hierarchy. No culture is intrinsically superior. All have contributed to the grand tapestry of human experience. Every thread, be it Chinese silk, Indian cotton, or African wool, is essential to the beauty of the whole. The true legacy of this era is not just Michelangelo's David or Leonardo's inventions. It is also the poetry of Ghalib, the philosophy of Wang Yangming, and the manuscripts of Ahmed Baba. They are all monuments to the human capacity for greatness and introspection. In the end, this story teaches us to be better historians of our own lives. It invites us to look for renaissances in unexpected places, to value voices that have been silenced, and to understand that wisdom can flourish anywhere there's a mind willing to ask questions. The narrative of a global renaissance is not a footnote in history. It is history itself, told in its entirety. It is the recognition that the spark of human genius belongs not to one race or one continent, but to all of humanity. It is our shared heritage. Returning to Wang Yangming, his concept of innate knowledge, or liangji, is fascinating. He believed that every human being, regardless of social status or education, is born with an intuitive grasp of good. Education wasn't about learning something new, but about wiping away the dust that obscures that knowledge. This idea empowered common people. It suggested that a peasant could achieve wisdom as easily as a scholar, simply through self-reflection and moral action. It was a democratization of knowledge that challenged the Confucian intellectual elite of the time. In the Mughal Empire, the art of miniature portraiture was also an expression of this humanism. Previously, Islamic art often avoided direct human representations. But Mughal artists began to paint incredibly detailed and psychological portraits of the emperor and his court. These portraits weren't just to glorify the ruler, they were deep studies of individual character. They captured the personality, mood, and essence of the person. It was a celebration of the unique individual, a central idea in any form of humanism. Meanwhile, in Africa, the Trans-Saharan Trade Network didn't just transport gold and salt. It transported books and ideas. Camel caravans were mobile libraries connecting Timbuktu with North Africa, Egypt, and the Middle East, creating a vibrant intellectual ecosystem. The book culture in Timbuktu was so important that it was said the most profitable business wasn't gold, but the buying and selling of manuscripts. Private families prided themselves on their libraries, and the scribes who copied texts were among the most respected professionals in the city. A crucial aspect of Timbuktu's humanism was its development of jurisprudence, that is, the philosophy of law. Scholars didn't just apply the law, but wrote extensively about it, debating how to adapt it to local conditions and how to ensure it was just and rational. This demonstrates a trust in human capacity to reason and create a just social order, rather than relying solely on divine revelation without interpretation. It's the human intellect working in partnership with faith, a key characteristic of Renaissance thought in all its forms. When we compare these movements, we see recurring themes. One of them is the tension between tradition and innovation. None of these humanisms rejected the past entirely. Rather, they looked to their own traditions for the tools to build a new future. Italian humanists reinterpreted Plato, Ming scholars reinterpreted Confucius, and the scholars of Timbuktu reinterpreted Islamic law. They were all standing on the shoulders of giants to see further, a deeply humanist attitude. Another common theme is the new role of the artist and intellectual. They were no longer mere anonymous artisans or copyists. They began to be seen as individuals with a unique vision and a particular genius. The concept of authorship and personal voice gained unprecedented importance. This is evident in the fame of figures like Michelangelo, but also in the respect held for a master calligrapher in Persia or a great scholar like Ahmed Baba, whose name was known across a vast region of Africa. Individual genius was celebrated. So, why did the story of the European Renaissance become the dominant narrative, eclipsing all others? The answer has a lot to do with power. From the 16th century onwards, European colonial expansion allowed it to impose its worldview and its version of history. History, as is often said, is written by the victors. The narrative of a single Renaissance that emerged in Europe and then enlightened the rest of the world fit perfectly with the ideological justification of colonialism. It presented Europe as the engine of human progress. Decolonizing history doesn't mean erasing Europe's achievements. It simply means making room at the table for the other guests who also participated in history's banquet. It's correcting an omission and presenting a more accurate, complex, and frankly, more interesting account. For example, the very term Renaissance, meaning rebirth, implies a previous death, the Middle Ages. But this idea of a dark age is a very specific construct of European history. It makes no sense to apply it to China, India, or Africa, which had their own golden ages. The Song dynasty in China, for example, which preceded the Ming, was one of the most scientifically innovative periods in human history. Printing, gunpowder, and the compass were developed there centuries before they reached Europe. You could hardly call that a dark age. Similarly, the Golden Age of Islam, between the 8th and 13th centuries, preserved and expanded Greek knowledge that Europeans would later rediscover. Scholars like Avicenna and Averroes were intellectual giants whose works were fundamental to the European Renaissance itself. So history is less a straight line and more a web of influences. Knowledge flows, transforms, and adapts. The European Renaissance did not arise from a vacuum, but was part of a much older global conversation, though it is often not recognized that way. Ultimately, this broader global view of the Renaissance offers us a lesson in humility. It reminds us that no culture is an island. We are all connected, and progress in one part of the world often depends on advancements that occurred elsewhere and at another time. This also redefines what it means to be modern. Modernity is not an exclusive club invented in Europe. The ideas we associate with it, like individualism, reason, and skepticism, have emerged in multiple forms in different cultures throughout history. The Persian poet Omar Khayyam, who lived long before the Renaissance, wrote with a doubt and hedonism that sound incredibly modern. He questioned the afterlife and advocated for enjoying the here and now. Isn't that a deeply humanist sentiment? In Japan, during the Muromachi period, the aesthetic of wabi-sabi developed. It's a worldview centered on the acceptance of transience and imperfection. It values the beauty of modest and humble things. It's another form of humanism, one that finds beauty in real human experience. Each of these traditions offers a unique perspective on the human condition. By studying them together, we gain a stereoscopic view, a three-dimensional and much richer picture of what it means to be a thinking, creative, and curious person in this world. This knowledge isn't just for academics. It has a real impact on how we see ourselves and others. If a child of African or Asian descent learns that their ancestors were also protagonists of great intellectual awakenings, it strengthens their identity and sense of belonging. And for those of European descent, this story offers a richer, less isolated view of their own heritage. It shows that their culture has been part of a global conversation, not just a source of enlightenment. It fosters connection instead of exceptionalism. So the story of the global Renaissance is ultimately a story of hope. It is the story of how, despite enormous differences, human beings around the world have shared a fundamental impulse to understand themselves and improve their world through reason, art, and empathy. The challenge for us today is to continue that legacy. It is to keep building bridges of understanding between cultures, to remain curious about each other's stories, and to recognize that wisdom has no single accent or skin color. It is universal. Humanism is not something that was achieved in the past and is now simply studied. It is an ongoing project. It is the daily task of choosing reason over prejudice, curiosity over fear, and empathy over indifference. It is a choice we can all make. The next time you visit an art museum, look beyond the European galleries. Seek out the Mughal miniatures, the Chinese calligraphy, the African sculptures. In each of them, you will find a unique and powerful expression of the same humanist spirit we celebrate in the Renaissance. By doing so, you won't just be learning about other cultures, you'll be learning more about yourself. Because each of these artworks is a mirror reflecting a different facet of our shared humanity, a piece of the grand mosaic of who we are. History is a powerful tool. It can be used to build walls or to tear them down. By telling the story of a global Renaissance, we choose to tear down the walls that separate us and build a deeper, more respectful understanding of our human family. In summary, the Renaissance was not a single, localized event. It was a tide of humanist thought that rose on different shores of the world. The fact that they didn't know about each other doesn't diminish their importance. Rather, it increases it, revealing a universal truth about us. The evidence of these parallel renaissances is there in the manuscripts, in the poetry, in the art, and in the philosophies of these cultures. It's not a secret, it has simply been a story that hasn't been told often enough or with the enthusiasm it deserves. Understanding that the impulse to question, create, and improve is universal gives us a common ground for mutual respect. It shows us that, beneath our diverse cultural appearances, we share the same fundamental aspirations. And that is incredibly powerful knowledge. So, in conclusion, the history we were told about the Renaissance wasn't a lie, but it was an incomplete truth. It was just one chapter in a much larger and more exciting book. And the real intellectual adventure begins when we dare to read the rest of the chapters. I hope this journey through the humanisms of the world has opened new perspectives and inspired as much curiosity in you as it has in me. History is alive, and there are always new discoveries to make and new connections to explore if we dare to look. We've seen how in China, the individual mind became the source of truth. In India, art and faith united to celebrate human diversity. And in Africa, reason and law became the tools to build a just society. All renaissances in their own right. Recognizing a global renaissance does not seek to diminish the greatness of figures like Da Vinci or Petrarch. On the contrary, it places them in a broader context, as part of a global constellation of geniuses who, each in their own way, illuminated human potential. The next time you think about human progress, don't imagine a single torch being passed from hand to hand in one direction. Imagine instead multiple fires spontaneously igniting in different parts of the world, each warming and illuminating in its own way. This vision teaches us that the deepest ideas about humanity are not owned by anyone. They belong to everyone. They are an echo of our shared curiosity, a melody that has been sung in many languages throughout the centuries. We just have to learn to listen. And that is the beauty of history when it is told in its entirety. It is not a monologue, it is a conversation. And it is a conversation where all of us, no matter our origin, have a place and a voice that deserves to be heard and celebrated by the whole world. The idea that genius and enlightenment can arise anywhere is ultimately a deeply optimistic message. It means that the next great awakening, the next Renaissance, could be brewing right now in any corner of our diverse and wonderful world. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through a more complete and global history. It has been a true pleasure to share these ideas and explore together these fascinating intellectual awakenings that show us the richness of human experience across time. I sincerely appreciate your time and curiosity. It is you, the audience, who bring these stories to life and make the pursuit of knowledge a shared adventure. Your attention is the greatest gift for any communicator. Truly, thank you for being here. If you've enjoyed this perspective and want to keep unveiling the secrets that official history often overlooks, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And I'd love to read your opinion. What other hidden Renaissance do you know about? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.